and therefore the pressure needs to go on to Russia to get more seriously to the negotiating table and to have a framework or a deadline, if you like, for responding to what the Ukrainians have already put on the table and what the US is seeking to achieve in their initiative. So I think there's got to be a framework around that. Obviously, we'll discuss that with allies and with the US, but also, and this was a very strong resolve across the room, that now is not the time for pulling back or weakening on sanctions. On the contrary, now is the time for increasing sanctions on Russia to get them to the table to these negotiations to the hope of a ceasefire and a lasting and secure ceasefire that preserves the security and sovereignty of Ukraine. So that's as it were, the other element of the meeting today. So up until now, very much a focus on how do we defend a deal if we get there. Today, an equal emphasis, I would say, on how do we collectively, as a pretty large group of nations, ensure that we put pressure on the Russians to get to the table, to actually negotiate, and be really clear that they are filibustering, they are delaying, and we've seen this playbook before. Look, I mean, we in the mood for deadlines. I don't want to put a hard deadline on this, but we need to see this developing in days and weeks, not months and months, and we need to move on to that space. But I mean, so I'd say today was that came up, as it were, alongside what we need to do if there is a deal, as part of the big discussion that we had over quite a session this morning. Jeremy from the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You seem to be describing a very different world or different view of the war to the one that President Trump tells us about. I mean, this is all happening, isn't it? This talk of ceasefires because of President Trump's, first of all, his assertion during the campaign that he could sort it all out in a day. Then it was going to be 100 days. He was a great deal maker. That actually there is a reality here that neither side believed there could be a ceasefire, neither Ukraine nor Russia, that President Putin has made it clear on multiple occasions that actually his view of what should happen is not a ceasefire, but it is either victory through capitulation of Ukraine or victory on the battlefield. Isn't it time, in fact, to actually say, this isn't going to work? We shouldn't be going for a ceasefire. We should be going for something else, maybe more military support for Ukraine that will enable them to make progress on that battle.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that President Trump absolutely clearly wants a lasting peace in Ukraine, and that's directing all of his actions. And in a matter of weeks, he has got both sides, as it were, to a negotiating table, and we've made some progress. Ukraine has clearly put forward 2 weeks ago now its proposal in relation to a ceasefire. What we now need to do, in my view, is increase the pressure on Russia to get to that proposal on a ceasefire, to meet it and to match it as a first step towards a lasting peace. And I think that's the right course, and that's why we are supporting the US in this endeavour. And that is amongst the things we discussed this morning. And at the same time, we have to answer the question, if there's a deal this time, why will it hold in the way that the deals in the past have not held? Because this wouldn't be the first time that a deal has been reached, but what we need to make sure is it's the last time that a deal is reached and not breached and is held to. So that's why we're focusing on pushing forward and put pressure on Russia and answering the question, how would you defend a deal if a deal is in place? And I genuinely believe that is the right course. Everybody wants lasting peace. Everyone wants a negotiated settlement, not least the Ukrainians. They've been subjected to this illegal invasion for over 3 years now. They've been incredibly resilient. Zelensky has led from the front, in my view, over all of those 3 years, and he's now leading from the front again in relation to these ceasefire discussions. Thank you.
Follow up on that, Prime Minister. What makes you so certain then that there is a way of persuading President Putin to give up his long-held and very publicly discussed views on the future of Ukraine, which he believes should effectively be part of Russia?
Well, nobody could stand here, and I'm not going to say with great certainty, by date X, we will have got to this point. What I am saying is that this is a process. I believe the goal is the right goal, which is a lasting peace in Ukraine that secures the security and sovereignty of Ukraine. I am not alone in that view, because that is the President Trump's view. It's clearly the view of a group of countries now that we've put together, 30 countries, openly saying amongst themselves this morning that this is the strongest they've seen Europe in a very long time. And they mean Europe and not institutions within Europe. And it is, of course, the view of Ukraine. So I can't stand here with certainty and say, yes, I know exactly what the outcome will be on what day. What I do know is that that politically, if we can provide that leadership, backed up by operational plans, then that is the best chance, in my view, of achieving the outcome that we all want. Chris, GB News.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, Russia's today warning of a direct conflict with NATO if your coalition, the Willing, puts troops on the ground in Ukraine. Will you give MPs a vote on your plans before that happens? And if I can quickly ask about the spring statement yesterday, you told us that we'll be £500 better off from the spring statement, but just next week, energy bills go up, council tax bills go up, water bills, broadband bills, TV licence, rail fares go up, plus national insurance for employers, plus fees of income tax thresholds. £500 won't touch the sides of what's facing your voters next week. Are you gaslighting them? And what's your message to them about the cost of living crisis?
Let me take I think ended up being three parts of your question, Chris, but fair enough. Look, in terms of what Russia says, we know what Russia wants. It wants a defenceless Ukraine. So it doesn't surprise me that Russia's saying their position is Ukraine shouldn't have any capability of its own or any assistance or help from anybody else. That rather gives away their opening stance on this, and that can't guide us in our response. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves with a vote because we're not at that stage. We are at the stage of turning the political momentum into operational plans, looking at the various options, and then going for the next piece of work with the Chiefs of Defence. But you know my long-standing position, which is if we were to deploy in any scenario on a long-term basis, then of course Parliament should have a say in that, and I don't deflect from that. Look, on the people being £500 better off, it's not me saying that, it's the OBR. And that is really important because we said that we would improve living standards under a Labour government, and that is what the OBR says we are doing. And obviously their calculation takes into account other factors. That is materially different to the last 14 years. If there's one thing above all else that singles out the last 14 years under the Tory government, it's that it was the biggest downgrading and reduction in living standards in generations. So that is really important. And of course, alongside that, interest rates are coming down. If people are on mortgages, that makes a material difference. Wages are up higher than prices. So in terms of what people feel in their pockets, that's a really important measure. And of course, for those on the lowest income, that's 3 million people, they will have that hike in the minimum wage. So what we're doing is, in answer to your question, securing our economy, taking the decisions that are necessary, seeing that impacted in the OBR's assessment that people will be £500 better off, so living standards will go up, very important. But at the same time, because of the investment we made in the NHS and others, we've seen 2 million additional appointments in the NHS. We said we would do that in the first year of a Labour government. We've done it in 7 months. For 5 months, waiting lists have come down, even during the winter. So I think we can be clear that the decisions we made in the budget were the right decisions. They were tough, but they were right, and you can see now some of the effects of them. Thank you very much, Chris. I've got Ulysses, I think, next.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Bonjour.
French television, BFM TV. Emmanuel Macron just said that you are going to co-pilot the military support for Ukraine, and you announced that there will be a mission in Ukraine with the British and French Minister, maybe of Defense. So are you the co-pilots with Emmanuel Macron of what's being done to reassure Ukraine of the support of the European nation? And also, Emmanuel Macron this morning again explained how he sees this force of reassurance, this European force. So how would you describe this force? What is it going to do if it happens? Macron spoke about, sending troops around big cities and around military bases, strategic bases. How many military do you see joining this force, and how many countries would participate? Thank you.
Well, this morning the group of countries asked Emmanuel and me to sort of lead the coordination of the efforts that we have touched on this morning. Now, that is obviously something we do in conjunction with and in liaising with all of our partners at every level. But it's really just to take that effort forward and then to take it into the next stages, the Chief of Defence meeting that will be happening in Ukraine, and to ensure that we keep the momentum going in the group that we've been able to put together. But let me just be really clear. This is a group of countries that are coming together in this way because each and every country represented, each and every leader is taking that leadership role at a crucial moment. And in a sense, I would say collectively, rather than I wouldn't focus on individuals, I wouldn't focus on Emmanuel or myself, I would say as a group, we are answering the question, which was, should and can Europe step up, to which the collectively is, yes we should, yes we can, and yes we are stepping up. And that's why I think the mood was of a stronger group and a broader group this morning. On the way in which the one aspect of this would work, and I say one aspect because there was a broader sense this morning that this is of course about Ukraine, but it is also about the future of security and defence in Europe more generally. And that's why the mood was very upbeat and determined. And in relation to Ukraine, I would describe this force as one. I mean, the first thing is we need to make sure the Ukrainian capability is as strong as possible. It has to be built on that. There's this idea of a porcupine strategy, which is making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position. They've got an incredible fighting force now. They've got 3 years' experience in conflict on the front line. So building that capability, maintaining and building on it, but also putting this, I would say, I say coalition of the willing, I mean, this is a force designed to deter in order to send that message to Putin that this is a deal that is going to be defended. That's, I suppose, the best description of it. We're familiar with that, obviously, in other countries in Europe, but that is done in the recognition that we also need US involvement in that. Thank you very much. I've got Kieran from Guardian.
You didn't say how many countries are willing to do and how many soldiers you think this force would be.
Oh, well, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Some figures like 30,000.
Yeah, so we've had 30 countries at the planning meetings. Different countries are putting forward different capabilities in terms of where they are able to contribute, and that's why we've broken this down into different planning scenarios, land, sea and air, but many countries are coming forward. I won't go into all the plans for reasons you'll understand, but when you've got 200 planners from 30 countries who are there voluntarily, that nobody can force them to be there. They've come along to be part of this, to say what capability they're prepared to put forward, which is a good thing. And some might have said months ago we wouldn't have got that far, but we are making progress. Thank you. Sorry, Kieran.
Yep. Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Overnight, President Trump announced his intention to impose 25% tariffs on cars and car parts coming into the US. Did he give you any notice of that? Does that make you pessimistic about the chance of signing a US-UK trade deal? And what happens if that trade deal doesn't come about and we do get hit by these tariffs?
Well, look, I think the tariffs are very concerning. There's no doubt about that. And I'm really clear in my mind that the sector, the industry, does not want a trade war. And that's why, first and foremost, we've got to work with the sector, work with industry in our response in relation to this. I think we need to keep, as ever, pragmatic and clear-eyed. We are engaged, as you know, in intense discussions with the US on economic arrangements on a number of fronts, but including to mitigate tariffs. And we'll continue in that way because I think that rather than jumping into a trade war, it is better pragmatically to come to an agreed way forward on this if we can, and that's why we're intensely engaging in the way that we are. But look, we always have to put the national interest first, and that's why I've also been clear that as we engage in those negotiations, those discussions, we will keep all options on the table. The industry doesn't want a trade war, but it's important that we keep all options on the table. But I'm working hard with others to make progress on economic arrangements, which I hope will better serve our country than a trade war, which will not, in my view. Thank you. Bruno from The Times.
You said that this was about defending a deal, having a force that designed to deter. We know the Russians don't like it. We've also heard from Trump's envoy talking to the Russians who described talk of it as posturing and posing. So it doesn't sound as if the US is very likely to be there. And on the European side, despite all this unity, if you want to do a security and defence pact with the EU, you'll first have to do a deal on fishing on catch quotas for cod, herring and scallops. Surely that's just insane in this period.
Well, look, firstly, to take that in stages, I don't doubt that Russia doesn't want the deal defended. Because an undefended deal is in their interest. That's what happened last time, and look what they did. So I don't pause for long on that particular point. On the US, look, we're talking to the US all the time, at almost every level, including NSA level. I speak to the president regularly, and it is really important that we continue to do so, working with the US, being clear about what we're achieving. And look, there's very broad consensus in the US that Europe could and should step up, and actually, that is what we are doing, and that is in our interests. It's in the interests of the US, and it's in the interest of defence and security in Europe. And look, I'm going to resist your temptation to start talking about fish because, I don't think a running commentary has helped in the past on any of these matters. And I'm clear in my own mind that whether it's in relation to the work that we're doing today on a broader defence and security, frankly, because we're talking about defence and security of Europe as a whole, or on the question of a defence and security pact with the EU and the broader reset, which of course we're working on as well. I think it's right that we do that in an orderly way. But I think it's fair to say that relations with our European partners are very much stronger now than they've been for some considerable period. And that is a good thing for the defence and security of Europe, in my view. Thank you very much. I've got David from Mail.
Thank you. Sorry, just to press you on fish, can you give us some clarity about whether you'd potentially sort of be willing to continue the status quo on fishing rights beyond 2026 in return for a defence and security deal? And again, are you not disappointed that fishing rights is being sort of weaponised in this way and put on the table? Shouldn't it be taken off when talking about security and defence? And just on the spring statement, Paul Johnson has said today that there's a very good chance that your government is going to have to come back for more tax rises or spending cuts in the autumn, suggesting that pensioners and the wealthy could be targeted next. He's right, isn't he? And shouldn't pensioners in Middle England be worried?
Well, let me take that in stages. Alongside what we're doing today, which is not to do with the EU reset, it's obviously a broader question, a number of countries. We're making real progress. At the same time, we are looking to reset our relationship with the EU. I think there is a better, closer deal to be done on trade, on defence, on security, on issues like energy. We're working hard at that with the EU. My strong view is that the best chance of getting a reset that works for both the United Kingdom and the EU is not to engage in negotiations and discussions outside of the arrangements that we've set up. That was tried a number of times in the past and to my mind didn't work particularly well. So I don't want to avoid your question, but I don't want to get dragged into the very thing that I want to avoid, which is trying to have some sort of open negotiation through press conferences rather than the orderly way that I think is most likely to be to achieve the results we need and actually to be the right thing in our national interest, because in the end that's the thing that I have to focus on as we go through this. On your question of tax, well look, the first thing is to say we haven't raised tax in the spring statement. And I think at every press conference I did before yesterday, the challenge to me was, you're going to have to raise taxes in the spring statement, aren't you? And I said, wait till the spring statement. We got the spring statement and we haven't. What we've done is built on the stability that we need and to go further and faster on security and growth in what is undoubtedly a changed world. We did have manifesto commitments in relation to tax and what taxes we wouldn't raise, and we've kept good to those promises. Obviously, I'm not going to write future budgets. Every Prime Minister and every Chancellor from every government always takes that position. But you know, if you look at the pattern, if you like, or the intent from both the budget and the spring statement, you'll see that when it's come to the decisions we've had to make, we have not taken the decision to increase tax, and I think that indicates the mindset that we bring to this. Thank you very much. And I've got Philippe from Le Monde. Philippe.
Hi. Given your current commitment for security of Ukraine and also the defense of Europe, what do you think of the proposal of the future German Chancellor Merz to create a kind of European defense community together with the EU member states, with the UK and with Norway? How do you react to this proposal? And second question, Merz also is asking for a discussion about the French and British nuclear umbrella. I would like to know what's your reaction about this proposal. What could be the contribution of the British dissuasion, nuclear dissuasion? Thank you.
Well, look, on I think both parts, as it were, on European defence and the measures that are being taken. Firstly, at the EU level, I welcome them. I welcome the fact that there are now proposals that the President of the Commission has put on the table, particularly in relation to funding. And we shouldn't underestimate just what a big step forward that is for the EU. And I'm pleased about that because I do think that just as we've increased our defence spending, other European countries should do so. And by providing credible and effective funding mechanisms, I think the EU has taken a really important step forward there. We will continue to work with them on that. I think that true it is that Norway and the UK will broadly work very closely with Europe on defence and security in any event. That is not a new thing. Obviously we work very closely, particularly with Norway in relation to matters up in the North Sea. So that's nothing new about that. I welcome that. That is good progress. On the question of nuclear, look, first, our nuclear capability, our independent deterrent. I obviously went to meet one of the submarines as it was coming back in from a long tour last week, and then had the keel ceremony for the next generation, the Dreadnought. It's a very important capability, deterrence capability that we have. We do commit that to NATO. So in that sense, we are already committed in that way. But on the broader question, I do think it's important to the defence of security in Europe that France and Britain in particular are working as closely as we are working at the moment. Alongside other countries. This is not just two countries that are working on this. There's this general consensus across 30 countries now, most in the EU, but not all, countries beyond that. But it is good, in my view, for the defence and security of Europe when France and Britain are working as closely as they currently are on defence and security. And in the end, that is important for Ukraine, it's important for Europe, but it's also important for the United Kingdom because history tells us that conflict and insecurity in Europe will wash up on our shores. And so it's very important in our own national interest that we work in this close way. Thank you very much. Thank you.